So recently, Sony had their first Sony Direct. It's pretty much a competition to the Nintendo Direct, and I thought this was going to be pretty interesting considering Sony wasn't going to be at E3 2019, and of course they're going to take the Nintendo route and kind of copy Nintendo with the Nintendo Directs, and this is their first time they ever did a Sony Direct. It's called State of Play, and what did we get in this State of Play? Well, let's talk about this State of Play really quickly. I'm not going to go over all the announcements, but I'm going to talk about the presentation, if I like the presentation that Sony delivered, do I actually like what they actually announced for the PlayStation, my overall thoughts with this Sony Direct. Overall, I do think this was kind of interesting that they decided to go with this thing called State of Play. Pretty much a Sony Direct compared to a Nintendo Direct. So either way, let's go ahead and talk about what I liked and disliked about this whole State of Play thing. Now, for the most part, when they did the presentation itself, I thought the presentation itself was really well done because they really didn't beat around the bush or they didn't pad it out or anything like that. It was pretty much game, and it was pretty much just somebody showing footage of games and they were just commentating on it. So I think that's a good way to go because people don't want to sit there and get bored. People don't want to just see stuff that's not related to games. They just want to see all the game announcements. So I think this is the perfect way to actually have one of these type of deals. You just get to the games and people can see as many games as possible, as fast as possible. So good job, Sony, for actually doing that. And I do like the way you actually handled your State of Play. Now let's actually move on to the actual Direct itself, and let's see if there's anything great in this Direct itself. Now, one thing I did have a complaint with, not just the games, going back to the presentation, I kind of felt like for some reason this was just too short of a presentation. I think it was only like 17, 18 minutes long, so it wasn't that long at all. It wasn't even a 30-minute presentation, whereas you know Nintendo usually does at least like 30 minutes of stuff, so I thought this was just too short. And now let's talk about the actual games. When it comes to So there is one thing I actually want Sony to steal from the Nintendo Directs, which I actually think make the Nintendo Directs really exciting and really fresh when it comes to the Nintendo Directs. One thing I really want Sony to steal from the Nintendo Directs is the fact that if you watch a Nintendo Direct, you will know that a lot of Nintendo Directs, they always have these surprise announcements where they'll say like, games available today, congratulations, you can buy it on the eShop, or there'll be like some type of demo that'll come out that a lot of people will be able to try, or you'll be able to give feedback on a demo for a game that's coming out in the future. And I think those kind of announcements are very cool because it gets people excited right away and it gets people potentially to spend money on your platform. So Sony needs to take a cue from Nintendo, in my opinion, and do something like that on the next State of Play where they come out and say, hey, congratulations, a new demo for this upcoming game is available. Or even if it's for a past game, that would still be cool because maybe not a lot of people played that game, or you didn't play that game at all, you just somehow skipped that game. Now would be the chance to try that game and see if you like that game, and it may get people to buy things on your platform, or do like a release, like say, congratulations, this game is available right now after the presentation, go ahead and go buy it. Or they can do some deals on that. They can say, well, after this thing we're doing this sale, like for instance, like the last Nindy Direct from Nintendo, they said, congratulations, there's a Nindy sale going on right now on the eShop, head on over and you can check out the sale. I think that would be great, and I wouldn't even be mad if Sony actually stole that part from the Nintendo Directs. When it comes to the actual games that Sony actually showed off for the State of Play, in my opinion, I'm just going to say it, I was actually pretty disappointed. They didn't actually show any big reveals. They didn't get anybody excited. And I think a lot of people agree with what I'm saying. I just was not blown away. There was nothing on there that I'm still thinking about today. It was definitely I would say a mediocre Nintendo Direct, honestly, unfortunately. But you do have to keep in mind, this is the first time Sony is doing this State of Play thing, so they can learn from their mistakes, and they'll have other ones throughout the year. So maybe that's why they didn't want to blow any amazing news at the first state of play. They wanted to do it in another state of play. That could be the reason. Or another theory I have is the PlayStation has already been out for a long time now, and maybe it's already at the end of their life cycle, so there's not going to be any mind-blowing news, or there's not going to be that one hard hitter that's going to make people go out and really want to play PlayStation or get excited for the PlayStation brand. I can see that as well, because you do have to realize we're only like 2 or 3 years away for the next PlayStation, the PS5. The PS5 could actually be coming as early as 2020, so if it's coming as early as 2020, most likely then they don't want to blow anything here, and most stuff that they're probably developing at Sony Studios with all their exclusives and things like that are going to be next generation games, so I get that as well. A lot of these things are going to be are going to be next generation games. It kind of sucks we didn't get any information on things like The Last of Us 2, which is a very big deal. Of course, they should have shown some footage on that, because of course it is going to be a PS4 game. I kind of have a feeling some of these games that they did show at E3 2018 could go either way. They can be like PS4 exclusive, or they could be a dual platform release where they're on the PS4 and the PS5. If that's already being developed, they'll be like, here's The Last of Us 2, but congratulations, if you want to play in better resolution and better frame rate, we have it for the PS5. It's going to be a dual release there. But besides that, no Last of Us 2 news, which a lot of people would have been excited for. We got some gameplay at E3 2018, but not too much to talk about there. That would have been really cool. That Mushima something, the ninja game that was released at 2018, they could have talked about that as well. There's some other games they definitely could have talked about. The only hard hitter that Sony actually talked about when it comes to this state of play thing that they actually did was the fact they did show Days Gone. Now, I know a lot of people maybe not be too excited for Days Gone, because Days Gone is another zombie game, and I know some people are just fed up with zombies. Zombies are zombies. It pretty much looks like a third-person shooting gallery with zombies. If you like that type of thing, it kind of reminds me of some other games that are zombie games as well. Overall, it's still a very interesting game, and I'm sure there's going to be some quality when it comes to Days Gone. Days Gone is not necessarily going to be all bad, but looking at the footage, at least for me, it pretty much looks like your standard zombie shooter. What else can I really say about Days Gone? Am I actually excited for Days Gone? Honestly, for me personally, I'm not really blown away by Days Gone. I guess it's the fact that we've had too many zombie games throughout the years, too many games similar to Days Gone. I'm just really not excited for Days Gone, but the quality that they're actually putting in Days Gone actually is very good. It is going to be a solid game, I do believe, when it comes out. There doesn't look like there's anything going to be wrong with that game. It actually looks like it's going to be a very good game. So if you're into Days Gone, then you may want to get excited for that game, I guess. And then they did show some Mortal Kombat 11 footage. Actually, it was the very last thing that Sony actually talked about when it comes to this direct, and I thought that was kind of interesting. They pretty much had some of the past characters like Jax, I think, and some other characters come back, like Liu Kang and things like that, coming back to the franchise. Of course, that was probably to be expected. I think this was the first time they actually revealed some of those characters coming to Mortal Kombat 11, so that's good news for Mortal Kombat 11 fans. Overall, Mortal Kombat 11 does look like a very badass game. I'm just going to say it there. It's actually also really cool. That game is actually a multi-platform game. It's kind of funny. One of the best things, in my opinion, was Mortal Kombat 11. I mean, it's just more of the same, but it does get people excited about Mortal Kombat 11. It's just funny it's not a Sony exclusive. I know that trailer specifically was probably a Sony exclusive, so it was the first time we were seeing those characters, but it's just funny that that was one of my highlights of the direct. Honestly, I love that game, and it's actually making me want to kind of buy that game, actually, because the way everything looks, it looks fluid, and you know Mortal Kombat always has really cool visuals. It hits hard. Overall, it's just a very gritty, a very satisfying good time with Mortal Kombat. You can't go wrong with Mortal Kombat. Definitely a badass game. Now there was this other game. Basically, I don't know how to describe it. I actually forgot the name of it. Something Genie, I think it's called. I could be wrong about that, but I'm going to throw some gameplay of that up right now, and I thought that game was actually pretty brilliant in my opinion. I was looking over the footage, and I couldn't really find anything that was too mind-blowing, but that one was actually a pretty good game. because it was pretty much a cartoony game, and pretty much how it works is you pretty much have this character that pretty much draws on a wall, and I think everything he draws on the wall becomes like his ally and becomes his friend in the game. It's very cartoony. I think it's a platformer. I could be wrong about that. Don't hold me to the platformer status, because I'm not quite sure if it is actually a platformer, but overall I was getting very good vibes off of that. I think that's a very good game. This is not also the first time we've seen that game. We actually seen that game back at E3 2018, and they actually did like I think a 20 or some minute demo of that game. So if you're still interested in that game, you can actually go back to E3 2018. You can find footage of that game where the devs actually talk about that game. So there is actually more information on that game outside of this direct. It's not outside of this state of play presentation Sony did. And outside of that game, really, I don't know what else to get really excited for when it comes to this when it comes to the Sony platform and when it comes to the PlayStation brand. I'm not really like blown away. Like I said, I don't know. There's nothing really to get excited for in my opinion. I don't know what they were doing. Now when it comes to the presentation, the way they opened this was actually kind of interesting. They pretty much opened this whole state of play up thing with a trailer for Iron Man. It showed Iron Man coming out of a thing, and then it said Marvel, and a lot of people were excited. Maybe they were thinking this was going to be another Spider-Man scenario where we have an open world Marvel Iron Man type game that's going to blow our socks away, but lo and behold, that wasn't even the case. The case was that we do actually get a Iron Man PSVR game, which was pretty interesting. I know some people out there don't like VR, and of course some people have motion sickness when it comes to VR, and I know a lot of people don't like it because VR is one of those things that, at least with the PS4 currently, it's still very clunky to hook up, and even when you leave it hooked up, you have a lot of wires sitting around, and you have another box sitting around, so I don't blame people for not liking VR in the current state it is, and some people just don't like wearing a headset. I heard headsets could get too heavy after a while. I'm actually liking VR. I think VR is an interesting concept. It's always good to see what Sony and things could do with VR, but overall I think the one wrong thing with this Direct, which some people are talking about, is the fact that they focused on too many VR games, and I totally have to agree with a lot of people out there. I think Sony definitely focused way too much on the VR side of things, because you do have to realize a lot of people don't have VR. Yes, no one would consider the PlayStation VR a failure, definitely not, but when you look at how many units are out there, there's still not even half of the fan base even owning a PSVR headset, so a lot of people were just bored out of their mind watching all that VR stuff, and a lot of the stuff they showed in VR wasn't even all that great in the first place. We got some hit or miss type games like the Iron Man game. I can see that being quite fun, but then that looks like it could be boring after a while. We also got No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky is getting an update where you can actually play that game in VR. It's actually quite funny. That game's been getting a lot of support from the devs. That's pretty much how that game should have been when it came out. Maybe not the VR support specifically, but they've been updating that game. So if you haven't played No Man's Sky, maybe you should revisit that game, talking about No Man's Sky. But it is kind of cool that they are giving it a free VR update where you can play No Man's Sky in VR, and that world would actually make sense to visit in VR. So props to the devs for actually updating that game and giving that game VR support. And then the other one, which I don't think anybody was expecting to get VR, was Five Nights at Freddy's. Five Nights at Freddy's actually got a VR update, and I think that's absolutely cool how that game got VR support. So if you wanted to play, I think the original one with like updated content or slightly more content, you can do that. And then they had a whole segment on the whole state of play where they actually showed a lot of VR. I actually wasn't expecting going into this thing to talk about that much of VR. I do know that they were already going to talk about VR because when they announced this thing, they're like, tune in to see the upcoming PS4 games / VR games. So I was expecting some type of VR presence at this state of play presentation, but I wasn't expecting them to do all this. It seemed like at the very beginning, they were just hitting you hard with all the VR support. VR here, VR there, VR here. It was just a lot of VR to consume in one sitting, and since the presentation wasn't long at all, it pretty much seemed like most of the presentation was just VR. I guess fans who have a PlayStation VR headset have a lot to look forward to, and it really does seem like Sony is not abandoning their VR platform. It's definitely going to be a platform that's going to be moving on into the future, definitely with the PS5. It's actually funny now that we're sitting here talking about State of Play that it'll be interesting to see what Sony is actually going to do with VR moving on to the PS5. I do know there's been so many rumors talking about they're going to make it much more of a streamlined process. If they make it a much more streamlined process, I'm pretty sure more people are going to play it, more people are going to buy software, and more people are going to keep it hooked up and things like that if they make it streamlined, because that's the biggest part with the VR headset. It's just not a streamlined process. Like I already said at the beginning, too many wires, a box, it's just clunky right now. So if you get it integrated with the PS5, that would actually be mind-blowing. What would actually be even more mind-blowing if they got it integrated into the PS5 where you just connect the wires to the PS5 and put the headset on. It would actually be even more mind-blowing if they actually made it built in. But on top of that, it's actually wireless. So you just buy the headset and then you're good to go. You don't have to worry about any wires at all, and you don't have to worry about a box. That would actually be the way to go next generation. What would actually be really cool is if they had a PlayStation bundle. I don't know if they did it with the PS4 Pro or the PS4 Slim or anything like that, but what would actually be super cool with the PlayStation VR headset would be if they had some type of bundle where it just includes it. I know they'd probably charge another fee for it, but it would be cool if they just had a bundle where it just flat out includes it and you save like maybe $100 on that as well. So you get the PlayStation, like let's say the 5, and then you get the VR headset, because by then there'll be a lot of VR stuff to try out, and of course they're going to keep supporting that platform for quite some time. We know it's not going anywhere. I'm kind of getting sidetracked now talking about the PS5, but overall, my final thoughts with this State of Play presentation that Sony recently did, I think overall this was a pretty mediocre thing. There was nothing to get excited for, no new hype game announcements, there was not too much there. Like I said, a lot of PSVR stuff there, a lot of stuff we already knew about, like the Days Gone. I guess the new Days Gone trailer wasn't necessarily new, it was some new information, and then we also got some Mortal Kombat information, and outside of that, that's pretty much all to get excited for. Again, keep in mind they are going to be doing more State of Play ones, and this is their first time doing State of Play, so maybe they wanted to hold back on the content because they knew they were going to be doing more in the future, and by not doing a lot here means they can talk about more stuff. They don't want to blow it all in one thing, and I get that. Sony wants to save some stuff for later on, and on top of that, like I said again at the beginning, you do have to realize that maybe it's the end of the life cycle, they don't have much to produce anymore, they're saving all their stuff for the PS5 and things like that, so maybe that's why they didn't have a lot to talk about. But overall, I thought the presentation was actually, they did it great, just not really good information. There was nothing exciting to get over with. But yeah, it's just a State of Play. What else can I say about their first outing from Sony? Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News, signing out.